Okay. Anyone who has a cat or a dog will know that you can play with them forever. You throw a ball and the dog will chase it. And if you're lucky, it will even bring it back. If you have a laser pointer, you know that the cat will follow it and try to catch it. But how long can a human play before they get bored? We know that kids can play for hours, but at a certain point and a certain age, they start turning this play into a game. What does this mean? It means start adding rules and conditions and limitations. So for example, they have a ball and they start kicking the ball against the wall, and at some point they say, okay, if you miss the ball, you lose a point. Or when you look them in the eye, the first one who blinks loses. So, and they turn this play into a game to make the play more engaging and last longer. And when we turn exercise into sports. So running itself is pretty boring, but if you put some people together and you add a ball, 4 poles, and you say, okay, you cannot use your hand, you have a game. So this turns the same exercise, running, into something that is much more engaging and it lasts longer. And you'll probably be motivated to do this more often. And this is what we do within the game, in the domain of gamification. We take game elements and we apply that to a non-game environment to engage people. And that brings me to the definition that describes it not that good, but it does cover the elements that we focus on. So gamification is the use of game design thinking within a non-game environment to engage people, motivate action, and promote learning. It's what we know about motivation and engagement from the core areas like behavioral psychology and especially people's irrational behavior. And we apply that to areas where we want to increase participation of individuals and of groups. It's a human-centric approach to solving the problem of engagement. So, hi, my name is Niels van der Linden, and I'm the managing director of the Istanbul-based ACT API Behavior Mechanics. In Turkey, we also use the name İşte Oyun. And I'm going to link my domain, gamification, with the topic of the conference, Management 2.0. I'm going to do that by talking about 3 areas that are linked to gamification, and also it's the reason why gamification is an important element for the business domain. Motivation, engagement, and performance. So if we look at the workforce, then we see this engagement problem, which basically looks like this. The person in the front is giving it all he's got. He's like really working hard, very dedicated. The 2 people behind are pedaling along, but they're saving their energy for some reason. And the person in the back is actually slowing down the team. So engagement is important, as this is linked to performance. And it's for each and every employee, but also for the teams, the departments, and the organization as a whole. And I like to prefer to look at this as the engagement potential. So research has shown that a small part of the organization is actually engaged. A bigger part, like 70 to 80%, is disengaged. Which means that although they do their job, they're not giving it all they've got. They're less productive, will less likely point out problems or room for improvement, and they're less likely to share new ideas. Disengaged employees are still satisfied with their work, but they're just there to do their job and get paid, help themselves progress in their career, and go for that personal win. But engaged employees, they are aiming to go above and beyond. They want to see your company progress, and then they want to progress with it. They're interested in the win-win situation. These are the people who are going to suggest improvements, point out problems, and they will share any positive thing about your company with their social network, which is relevant for recruitment and partnerships. And they're also less likely to leave their job. So this is especially for the younger generations. There's a higher turnaround. It's in the US, for example, it's about 3 years they stay with one company and then they move on to the other. Disengaged managers also create disengaged employees, and active disengagement is actually costing a company money because it increases sick days, there's a higher turnaround of employees, there's lower productivity, and there's a higher opportunity cost. So you can imagine that a higher engagement leads to a higher performance of the individual employee, but also of the teams and departments that come with that. So what does an employee in an organization know about what good performance looks like? Or even more important, what their current performance is and how they can improve their performance. So performance for an employee is still often that once in a year talk with their manager about how they've been doing, if they're lucky a little bit more often. And it's lacking that real-time feedback that we see in games. If we could get their experience a little bit closer to that of a game, then these employees would get instant feedback. They would see a clear path to mastery, and they would see the ability to set goals and achieve them to level up. So performance shouldn't just be about how you've been doing, but even more important, how are you doing now and what are you going to do next? It's about being able to set your own goals, and for management to help them develop the skills required to do their job, like planning, or project management, or any skills that they are required. And if you give that responsibility to the employee, then they feel more ownership and they will be more motivated to do their job, stick to the plan, and eventually reach their goal. Then performance becomes goal setting. And it becomes progressing by learning and doing. It's about turning motivation into action and action into achievements. And now learning itself becomes more meaningful as well because it's linked to becoming successful. Often companies have difficulties to get their employees to get engaged with training programs or workshops. But if you turn the learning and the doing, and if you make it part of the path to mastery, it makes much more sense. It's easier for an employee to get engaged with their job and the achievements that lead to business success. The smallest ingredient in all this is behavior. It's that little thing that turns motivation into action, which leads to engagement, and if done well, it results in performance. This behavior needs to be valuable for your business, obviously. It needs to be possible for a person to do, so this is where you give them technology and tools and training. And it needs to be desired by the person to do well, and this is where the motivation comes in. So how does gamification relate to this? Before I go deeper into gamification, let me tell you first what gamification is not. So gamification is not about turning things into a game. So don't think about a future where employees are playing some sort of a Farmville game, and while they're playing that game, they're actually doing their job. These are games which are still an important element within the business world, but they serve a different purpose. Gamification is also not just about slapping on points and badges and putting people into a leaderboard to create a sense of competition. Because in most organizations, competition is the last thing you want to stimulate within. The purpose of an organization, after all, is to collaborate and not to make people compete internally. Competition is that company down the street whose customers you want to convince to switch teams. So gamification is about motivation. And it's about understanding how to create this win-win situation that turns the current have-to-do tasks into the challenges and achievements that people want to do. So in order to motivate an employee, you need to put yourself in their shoes. You need to know what drives the people to take the action, And it's not just about them getting paid, especially not in the mid and long term. Daniel Pink talks about 3 areas. It's autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Individuals like to get some freedom to choose what they can do. If you tell them, do this, do this, do this, that's called micromanagement. And that might have a good result in the short term, but in the long term, it's going to backfire because people don't like to be micromanaged. They need to feel this freedom, this autonomy. They like to improve themselves by developing a single skill or maybe leveling up in your organization. So it's about giving them a long-term ability to become better. And it's about showing how to do that. And people like to do something that is meaningful. So transparency of why a particular little task is meaningful to them as well as to the organization is already a very important part. And so in gamification, this would be like the storytelling and understanding what the context of a single action is. So I'm talking about an approach where the employee and his or her goals are at the center, and we build an experience around that. This is not just inside an application that they might be using, but it's even more on an organizational level. So this is different from a different view of how to build an organization. For example, it's not function-centric design, where we put people in a box, like this is the marketing department and this is the sales department. Or a business outcome-centric design, where we only measure performance based on output. It's also not a technology-centric design, where we give people tools, or in the old days, we give them a machine and say, you are hired to operate this machine. So we're using measuring, monitoring, and management as facilitating activities to help the employees progress. We design in a way to enable behavior, which is both desired for the employee as well as for the company. So measuring the elements of engagement, a service provided for each employee, so that they can set their own goals and accomplish them, get recognition for their knowledge, their know-how and achievements. Their have-to-do tasks become interesting challenges that they want to do. This leads to development, which happens to also lead to business success. But it's about a win-win situation with a long-term sustainability for both the employee and for the organization. So this brings me, oh, I missed one. So this brings us to the question that I'm going to ask. Do you know how to measure and influence the valuable employee engagement and how to connect that with your business goals? Later on from here, we get to other questions to understand the motivation of the individual employee, and we start building the experience that facilitates engagement. We share the feedback of the goals and achievements with the employees so that they can improve on a personal level. And as a result, we will understand which game elements to use, which tools to implement, and that basically is the world of motivational design, which we know as gamification. So that brings me to the end of my presentation. I want to thank Halil and his team for having me here. If you have any more questions later on about gamification, motivational design, I will be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Niels.